Hello, I'm Ann Bocock, and welcome to Between the Covers. Joanna Campbell Slan is a born storyteller. She'll tell you herself. She's been writing stories since she was a little girl. Today, she is a best-selling and award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction. And if I haven't lost count, she's up to 18 books, including historical fiction and 2 contemporary mystery series. I am so pleased to welcome Joanna Campbell Slan to Between the Covers.
Thank you, Anne. But I think I misled you. It's 28 now.
28?
Yes.
Okay, I read that wrong. You have been writing
my
books. You said you were writing books since you were a little girl, which
Yes.
you thought were books. And I believe you had once said this was an escape for you due to a chaotic childhood?
Yes, absolutely. I grew up in Vincennes, Indiana, and my father was an alcoholic. So he wasn't the type of alcoholic that goes to bars and sings Danny Boy. He was the type of alcoholic who threw people off the front porch. And to escape that, I quickly learned to read. And I walked to the public library. It was 13 blocks away. I read everything I could. I would walk back reading the books, and I trip so often that my knees are totally messed up from tripping over tree roots. So books were an avenue of escape for me early on, and it was a short jump from from reading to I want to write my own stories.
And you have written so
Yes, I
many
have.
stories. Before we get into what I think are these delightful series of mysteries, I want to go back a little bit
Okay.
because I have an observation about historical fiction, which
Okay.
you have tackled, and you did it well.
Thank you.
It can be a real challenge because to make it work, you have to know the real history,
Yes.
or it's going to be wrong.
Yes.
And I'm saying this to a woman who is obviously not afraid of a challenge because what did you pick to tackle but Bronte's Jane Eyre? You
right.
went beyond the story.
Yes, I did. And the weird thing that happened was you hear Jane Eyre referred to as a Victorian novel.
Right.
So I originally wrote the book and I set it in the Victorian times in the 1850s. And the editor got it, and I was getting off a plane on a book tour, and I got a phone call from my agent, and she said, the editor's in a panic. You set the story 30 years too late. I had 6 weeks to rewrite the book. So I did, 110,000 words. And what I did was I wrote during the day and I researched at night. So yes, it's daunting, it's scary. You always wonder, what is it I don't know that I need to know? Because the mistakes aren't, it's not like if it's something I can look up, I can fix it. But for example, I think it was Longfellow or somebody at that time, some of his poems had just come out, but nobody knew who was writing them. So I had referenced that she had gotten this book of poetry and and the author's name, and then by happenstance I read something else and I found out that it wasn't, that they were written anonymously. So it's things like that keep you awake at night, and you think, oh my gosh, everyone's going to know I'm an idiot.
You took a risk. Boy, did it pay off. Your readers loved it.
Yes, they did. And that book won the Daphne du Maurier Award, which is given by the Daphne du Maurier estate. And since I love the book Rebecca, and I'm sure a lot of you do too, that was a real thrill.
Well, while we're talking about historical fiction,
Yes.
I have to talk about The Glassblower's Wife.
Yes.
It is a short story. It's a long short story,
Yes.
but it's a short story. Let me give a little background, and you
Sure.
can help me. Late 1600s,
Right.
Jewish glassblowers had to flee Venice.
Right.
Now, take it from there.
The Doge in Venice, he was the ducal prince, he was actually an elected official, had decided Venice was the center of glassblowing for the world. And he wisely decided to keep the monopoly, so he decided that he would transfer all the glassblowers to the island of Murano. The idea was that they couldn't escape from Murano. Now, he said it was for public safety because they could burn down all of Venice. Well, a group of glassblowers got off the island, and they wound up going to France. and they worked on the Hall of Mirrors in Versailles. Of course, back then they didn't call it the Hall of Mirrors. But the Doge, when he found out that these guys had escaped, he put a price on their head, and he set assassins out to kill them. Now, there's no proof that they were Jewish, but when I was doing my research, I came across a scholarly paper that showed that in all likelihood, they may well have been all Jews. And this scholar detailed how he came to that conclusion. So in my mind, I turned all this over and I thought, what would it be like to be Jewish and to be escaping the Doge and trying to make a new life for yourself there outside of Paris and working on the glass mirrors in Versailles. And indeed, after the mirrors were finished, the Parisian government granted patents royal. In other words, they granted permission for a business to continue making glasswork that's still in business today.
And in true Joanna Campbell Slan fashion, there is a woman at the heart of this story. Her name is Ruth, and although while I'm reading it, she's in the background for so much of this book, it shouldn't have surprised me that she was very important.
I believe in spunky women.
That you do.
I do. I come from a family of girls. There were 3 of us, and I guess if there's a trademark, as you said, to my work, it's spunky women. And I visualized this young wife, and what would she do as the glassblowers one by one was assassinated. And I visualized a situation where it would become up to her to save the Jewish people that had moved there to the city outside of Versailles.
May I say she had what we would call a disability?
Yes. For some reason, she popped into my mind and she was mute. And I thought, well, wouldn't that be interesting? And there's a line in the short story, the long story book, where the matchmaker says to the man who wants to be her husband, do you want a wife who can't say the prayers over the candles, who can't say Baruch Atah? And he says, better a wife who can't say the prayers than a woman who can't feel the prayers.
When you draw your female characters, they're not superwomen. I want to thank you for that because this is really true across the board in what you write.
Yes.
Why did you decide that your women, and I don't want to say ordinary, but they're real women?
Write what you know. I mean, I goof up every day of my life. I do something silly, wrong, absurd, or whatever, and that's what makes us human. And what I believe is that there's a power in the ordinary that's undersung. I remember when I started to write my first book, I went to a book doctor, and she said, well, writing about a housewife will never work because her life isn't that exciting. She's not that interesting. But all the women I know give birth to babies. They're there to take care of their elderly relatives. They're there beside their husbands through ups and downs. So I thought that was baloney. So my women are real women because that's what I see in the world around me. Real women who are extraordinary.
And it works. It does work. Can we talk about the crime fiction subgenre that in the trade is called cozy?
Yes, we can.
A cozy mystery. I want to start with what qualifies as a cozy. In my mind, it is because there's no graphic violence.
Yes.
And usually, am I right, it's always a female protagonist?
No, not always. It's an amateur sleuth.
An amateur sleuth, okay.
And the reason I think that you're thinking female protagonist is that the archetype of a cozy is probably Agatha Christie.
Exactly.
And her stories, and Miss Marple. The amateur female sleuth who is overlooked and undervalued, but who figures out who done it because she can look at people and size up their relationships and think things through.
Many of today's best-selling mysteries are full of violence and the gore, and nothing really is left to the imagination. These are not the readers that we're talking about for cozy mysteries. It's a different group, correct?
I think cozy readers recognize that it's a violent world, but they don't see any reason to curl up with a book full of violence, particularly violence towards women. I mean, let's face it, that's part of reality. And most of us read somewhat to escape.
What makes the cozy work?
What makes the cozy work is that the village that the murder takes place in, it may not be a physical village, but it's a metaphorical village. It's a group of people who know each other. So it could be a knitting club or a scrapbook store, or it could be a small town. So it's the relationships between those people and the sleuth watching those relationships and coming to conclusions about it that drives the mystery, rather than a police procedural or, oh, let's see, what else? Or some sort of super spy who gets information that way.
Joanna, do you feel that by some critics that these books have been dismissed?
Oh, they are. They're totally dismissed. They are laughed at somewhat. There is a pecking order in the world of mysteries, and it starts with international thrillers, and then it goes to national thrillers, but the more gory, the more highly sought after, and those are the ones that get the most attention in bookstores. They're the ones that get the most attention from publishers, and the ones that the authors get paid the most for. And it goes down to what we call medium-boiled thrillers. And then this is very much a soft-boiled. And what's strange about it is that cozy readers are very, very loyal, and they will start at the beginning of a series and read through to the end. So they're often, the basis financially for a lot of the publishing successes, but it's just not very well regarded, I guess.
What's interesting is that you mentioned Agatha Christie, and she's probably the best-selling mystery writer of all time, hands down. And that would fit into the cozy genre.
Absolutely, but I think it's like quilts. Quilts are an art form, but because it's women's work, it's often devalued. By the way, I lived 6 blocks from Agatha Christie's house when I lived in England.
Did you?
One of her homes is now being turned into like an apartment complex, and it was right around the corner from the Waitrose where I shopped. And there's no marker at all that says that Agatha Christie lived there. Now, she has an estate that's out in rural England that's now become open to the public, but this place, it wasn't until after I came home, really, and I was reading a little more about her that I discovered that was her house.
That's interesting.
Isn't it?
There was a columnist for the New York Times who reviewed crime mysteries only, and she had really good things to say about the cozy genre, in that the appeal was for simpler, sweeter times, and she was a huge fan. So you're in really good company.
Good.
You started with Kiki Lowenstein.
Yes.
And how many books in that series?
We have 12, I think. 12 books, I think, and 20 short stories and novellas.
And then you a spin-off, I guess,
yes,
with the new character,
Caramia.
I love saying her name.
Thank you.
Caramia Delgado. Caramia
Yes.
Delgado. Here's what I love about her, because I feel kind of at home with her. She is smart, but half the time she is a mess. I mean, I don't think her hair is combed. She is not, well, she is worried about the 10 extra pounds, but then she'll order the fries and dessert at the same time. So you gotta love this woman.
And dessert, yeah.
You gotta love her.
Absolutely.
I know you created her, but don't you adore her?
I do. I really do. The best thing for me about being an author is that I put everything I love into the books. So no pet ever dies in my family because they go into the book. Nothing that I love to do ever gets wasted because it goes into the book. So Caramia is actually named after my husband's aunt, and she is an Italian-American princess, and Caramia means, of course, my dear heart, or my beloved, and so she was going through a rough time, and I decided to name the character after her.
That is sweet.
Thank you.
And the books take place on the Treasure Coast, which
Yes.
you know a little something about.
Yes, we live on Jupiter Island, and the ocean is right out our back door. So what I have seen living here, and some of you have lived here longer than I have, I'm sure, is just how vital the ocean is, how much it changes every day, how beautiful it is, and also some of the disasters that we are heaping on the ocean. When I get stuck for an idea, I go for a walk on the ocean, and that's why I wanted to give you this.
Thank you.
Will you open it?
I will open it right now.
Okay, okay.
We'll find out why you're going for what you're finding.
Oh,
your
yes.
walks on the ocean. And
well, I find all sorts of things, Anne, but I brought you something nice that I found.
All right. We're getting there. Here it is. Oh, it's beautiful. It is beautiful.
This and that, these are sea trash pins. And what I do is, as I walk the beach, I pick up trash. Plastic trash. Now, when I was in school, I was taught that plastic won't break down in the ocean, but now we know that that's not true at all. And what happens is the plankton and the little fishes and the animals eat the plastic, and it winds up in our food chain. Right now, 8 million tons of plastic a year are dumped into our oceans.
8 million tons.
8 million tons. If I recall, I think an elephant weighs 2 tons. So that's the equivalent of someone taking 4 million elephants and dumping them into the ocean every year. I walk up and down the beach, I pick up the pieces of plastic, and I take them home, I clean them, and I form them into these pins.
Now, who thought of this first? Because that's in your book.
Actually, I read something about it in one of my craft books, but she didn't quite go as crazy on it as I did. I tend to be obsessive.
But
that's exactly what Cara Mia would do, yes.
Exactly.
Because everything in Cara Mia's store is something that's upcycled, recycled, or repurposed. When we lived in England, one of the things I realized was people don't throw things away overseas the way we do. Everything's disposable here. And that really opened my eye to that. So Cara Mia goes to the consignment stores, and she goes to the flea markets, and she buys things, and she repurposes them and kind of gussies them up, as my mother would say.
You know, I was going to talk about one of the threads in the book being second chances.
Yes.
But not only for people, obviously for
objects.
The found objects as well, but yes, for the people in the book. And that was very poignant.
I think that that's a big part of life, is that we get a lot of do-overs. We may not realize it, but until you draw your last breath, you've got a chance to go back and correct things or make things better or make a difference. And that's what Cara and her crew is all about. And everybody in the book has some sort of backstory or history, kind of like garbage that they drag with them through life, and that's the way we are. We drag that with us, but at a certain point, you get to decide whether you turn loose of the garbage bag.
And it's what you do with that second chance.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I found very important was friendship. And I don't mean it in a trivial way. Lots of books are about women and friendship. But this went fairly deeper.
I don't know where I would be without some of the women friends that I've had, because whatever you didn't get from your biological family or your natal family, your friends can replace that. And they can help you see yourself in a more healthy, holistic way. And so what I wanted was to show how these different women, because they have very different personalities. There's Cara Mia, who owns the store. There's Sky Blue, who was in an abusive relationship, and she comes to work in the store. And there's MJ, and that's short for Mary Jane. Mary as in the Virgin, and Jane as in Jane Mansfield. Austin.
She's a good character.
She is, and she can sizzle, and she has this sensual attitude to her. So they're all very different women, and I think that that's one of the coolest things about Friends, is how different we can be, but how we can see and appreciate that.
And how people can come into your lives at maybe just the right time.
Absolutely.
Which is important in your book. When you write about Cara or any of the other characters, do you see them as living, breathing people?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when Kiki Lowenstein had her baby in the other series, I put up a birth announcement on my Facebook page, and I had people sending me congratulatory notes. And I was like, you realize, of course, this isn't real. I have had fans get into fights over characters. They are real to me, and I think because they're real people to me, they become real to the people that read them.
I think that's a good way of putting it. When you write a series, and you have written two series, you have written standalone books, what's the difference in the challenge? Do you know these people so well in the series that it's not difficult to write the next one?
The second book is always the hardest book to write. The first book, you've got this burning idea and you can't wait to get it down. The second book, it's kind of like when you build a house, you have to live with the footprint you made. So you have to you have to honor what it was that you put forth in the first book. For example, I couldn't decide to move where the store was. I couldn't decide to change some of the major characters or the backstory. So it's challenging, that second book. But after that, the third book is typically easier because you do know the characters, and it's like returning to old friends or family. It's like when you watch a sitcom on television. There's that comfort in knowing, okay, this is how this character is going to act. And I try to populate my books kind of like the Lucy show. There's someone who's an Ethel, there's someone who's a Fred, there's someone who's a Ricky. So you kind of, you've always got somebody doing something that they shouldn't be doing.
On the flip side, your readers are now so comfortable with these people that if you had them doing something that was uncharacteristic, they would let you know.
I had a woman who emailed me. She was on vacation and she was reading one of my books, and she thought that the pet died in the book. And she was standing in a swimming pool holding the book up, and she closed the book, threw it across the pool and said, "Damn that Joanna Slan." And her husband said, "What are you talking about?" And she stomped out of the pool and she emailed me and she said, "How could you do that?" And she went on and on. I got this email about this long, and I just sent her a line. I said, "Read the next chapter." And she came back to me and she said, "You have to promise that nothing will ever, ever happen to this pet." So I sent her, I said, "I solemnly swear that the pet will live the longest life of any animal in that breed ever."
You have time to email your fans, your readers?
I try to. I do. I'm pretty successful at doing it. I have an assistant, Sally, and Sally handles technical problems, like if people don't get a download from Amazon or something. Sally's good with that, but I love emailing people back. They give me such great ideas, Anne, and it gives me such encouragement.
And you write every day, I assume?
Yes, I do.
At certain time, you're sitting down at that desk?
Not so much a certain time as I just make sure that I write during the day. Like, for example, I didn't get to write this morning very much. I was answering emails, but I will probably write a little bit this evening. It's kind of like brushing your teeth. If you don't do it, you feel like something's wrong.
Gotta write.
Yeah, gotta get up and get that done.
Well, I have to say, you did it to me at the end of this book, Tear Down and Die, because I'm reading it. It's great. And then here we go. No spoilers here. I wouldn't do that. But you got me at the end.
Well, I have my husband to thank for that, because he is so devious, and I did not know this when I married him. And when I tell him the story, or when I share stories with him, he'll go, "Ooh, and then that person can do this to that person." And I always think, wow, this is scary.
But yes, so now I have to read the next one ASAP.
Good.
And I'm sure that if you're writing a series, that's what you want.
Yes. In fact, I actually did a serialized story on my blog, and I wrote something every day, and every day had to end with a cliffhanger.
Oh, my goodness. Well, now, having read this, I know that I will be seeing more of Karamia.
Yes, I hope so.
Do we know what's going to happen in the next one, or
yes,
can you tell?
Every one of the books in the Karamia series has to do a little bit with historical Florida. I mean, this is such a cool, fascinating, funky state. So in this one, it has to do with the highwayman paintings. Some of you may know about that. The itinerant painters, they were African Americans who painted along the strip from Vero Beach down to West Palm Beach. This one has to do with the Dozier Boys School. Now, as you know, there are a bunch of unrecovered, well, there were stories for 111 years that boys were being molested and killed. The state of Florida basically turned a blind eye to it, and now they've been digging up the bodies. There were supposed to be 33 bodies buried in Mariana. They found 55 bodies, and now in Okeechobee, they're looking for bodies. So this has to do with that. And then the next book, All Washed Up, is going to have to do with Lily Pulitzer.
Ah, and that's where we're going to leave it. So now we know what's left for Karamia, and we're going to wonder what's left with Joanna here. I want to thank you so much for being here. We have had such fun today. It's been such a delight to have you here. Thank you also for my lovely gift. In the mystery genre, Tear Down and Die, the Karamia Delgado is the new book. The new short story is The Glassblower's Wife. My guest today has been Joanna Campbell Slan, and it has been just pure fun. I'm Ann Bocock. If you want to know the whole story, join us next week on Between the Covers.